This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Canna Health.
Hey, cannabis consumers. Have you ever consumed a cannabis product thinking it'll make you feel a certain way, but then it doesn't? Don't you wish you had a clear understanding of your own DNA so that you could make informed decisions about what type of cannabis products interact best with your system? Well, now you can with EndoDNA. EndoDNA is a simple DNA test that maps your entire endocannabinoid system and then matches that summary with a specific cannabinoid ratio and terpene profile that best aligns with your unique genotype. Imagine being armed with personal information when visiting a dispensary. You'll have the knowledge and power and capability to purchase products that best align with your genotype. Visit their website to purchase the EndoDNA Collection Kit and Endo Decoded Report at endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. Again, that's endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. The future of cannabinoid therapeutics is here with EndoDNA. Mr. Kevin Hart, how are you, sir?
I'm excellent, Kevin. Thank you very much. How are you today?
I am doing well, sir. I got to tell you, first and foremost, for those that are just listening and not watching the video to this episode, Mr. Kevin Hart has a really good, solid foundational beard going on. And it goes very well with his white hair. And you were telling me before we recorded, Kevin, that you do a little bit of philanthropy work and giving back in the Christmas scene, acting as Santa. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I learned at a very young age that we're all obligated to give back, time, talent, or treasure, or all three, depending on where you are at your station in life. And I run a foundation for an organization called Boys and Girls Village. It's up in Connecticut. High-risk families, serve about 600 families per year. And historically, I would play Santa Claus. As I said, I don't know why they ask me, but they do. And it's a sister organization down here in Florida that heard I did it. And I live here now. And so they asked if I would do it. And, there's never hesitation for that. Back to we're obligated to give back. And, on a personal level, I get more out of it than these kids do. Because you get to see the joy on their face. They're getting a toy, for the holidays. And, they're just so excited, but they like to pull on the beard and see if it's real or anything. I'm not a store Santa Claus, so it's a lot of fun. And I've had some interesting events too, including the excited child leaving a gift behind for me on my lap. I have no notification, but you just roll with it and make it happen.
That's right. And, just the spirit of giving, right? I mean, in turn, Santa's getting gifts. So that it's just that kind of attitude and that vibe that you want to give off. And it's a beautiful thing, Kevin. Love that you're doing it. And you're a man of kind of different backgrounds and trades and skills, if you will, because I know before entering cannabis as the founder and CEO of Green Check, you have a real solid technology background. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I'm a nerd, but with my advanced age, the way I describe it is my propeller it's old, it's bent, it's rusted, but I'm still technically dangerous. I have a good, strong sense of what technology can do, but I'm less interested in how we achieve it, more interested in what we can achieve via technology. So I could sniff out the BS meter of, we can't do that, et cetera. No, we can. And so it makes for a very interesting set of conversations within the company. And especially when you look at the cannabis industry and access to business and financial services, I mean, that was the foundation point. How do you connect two independent, highly regulated industries that would love to work together, but they're not going to be able to figure out how, because of the variability of the rules and the data sets and what's required. So that nerd background training really served me well, along with the 4 decades of experience I had running up to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's perfect timing how you talk about that relationship between, financial services and the highly regulated cannabis industry. because today, I know this episode will publish later, but today is Monday, November 29th, which is, when the Senate is talking about and voting on the current NDAA
Mhm.
bill, which includes safe banking provisions within it.
Yep.
So I guess let's start there, Kevin. Let's we'll of course jump into green check later, and I want to hear the origin story, but just because this is so top of mind right now within the industry, let's kind of set the stage and talk about, key challenges when it comes to cannabis baking, starting back, say, just even last year, 2020, and how that's changed.
I think we've seen a significant shift forward and more of it, moving past the inquisitive nature to really, I call it screen kicking, as opposed to tire kicking. People are really starting to look at technology and look at the industry as to what they can do. And I think a lot of this is being pushed forward because of the activity that is happening down in Washington. All the conversations. Is it going to happen anytime soon? Will this happen this time? I'd like to think so, but I don't believe so, sadly. I think it's going to happen. So I think as people look at that inevitability and they realize that other people are doing it because they keep hearing the news and they keep seeing the stories, you also have that FOMO aspect. And so everybody's in a little different space, but gosh, from where we started, back in 2016 to even the beginning of 2021, right, where we were, a client of ours, Valley Bank, right? Their largest single deposit client right now is a cannabis business. This is the 30th largest bank in the country. And if anybody, myself included, said on January 1st, at the end of the year, a top 50 bank largest deposit customer is going to be a cannabis customer, that would have gotten marked off as wrong, predicted right away. And here we are in October, and that's what November, gosh, and that's what happened.
And so when you talk about the FOMO, and then just that example of a bank, top 50 bank that's entering cannabis, is it like you said, it's just because there's these financial institutions, these smaller ones anyway, are seeing that this is inevitable and they're jumping in, or they're at least kind of, dipping their toes in to kind of figure this space out? Is that what you're saying?
There's a piece of it there, Kevin, but I think the other part is really more before banking cannabis was binary. You were either going to do it or you weren't. And if you had to say publicly what your position was, because you had to make sure that if you weren't doing it, that you genuinely weren't doing it. Now, those lines have become blurred, and there's far fewer people that are taking that hard line of no, we're not going to do it. They're softer now. They're looking at the indirect, the CBD and hemp versus the marijuana, the psychoactive part of it. And then I think the other part too is that they view this inevitability, and they're hearing and seeing the positive stories, and they realize they're not going to be led off in orange jumpsuits and shackles and a public humiliation, provided they do it right. So that awareness, that willingness, and they're also seeing the evolution of the cannabis industry. I mean, it's still a very immature market, but the graduation and the growth of the industry and the respect that it's gaining through that process is really, really taking hold in conversations of, the top 5 banks all the way down to the smallest credit union.
And is that, are you seeing within that grouping of institutions, is there more, smaller to mid-size that are kind of gravitating toward this? Are you seeing larger institutions? Is it across the board? Like, what are you seeing more prevalent?
It's across the board, but the larger financial institutions, it's going to take them a long time to figure out how it would work within their structure and the constructs that they naturally just have based upon the size and the geographical spread. But certainly regional banks, but more importantly, the community banks and the credit unions associated with them. I mean, they are leading the charge in putting these programs together. And some are being very, very public about it. I mean, we have a client, Frankenmuth Credit Union, Michigan, And they are full out national, right out in front of everybody saying, we're doing this. And, that is, again, another shift in the right direction for both industries. It's not binary, right? It is for both sides.
Right. Totally. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, well, because it's so timely, and like we mentioned today, they're deliberating on the NDAA. Let's talk about the immediate impact that safe banking would have, within the industry.
So it's, in the truest sense of the fashion, it's somewhat of a double-edged sword. So there's a lot of financial institutions. First off, when Safe Banking Act passes, it's just not going to tip over and happen. It's going to take I think it's going to take 2 years, close to 2 years.
For implementation, you mean?
Yeah, for all the rules and regulations, because you have to look at the interagency dependency that this is going to bring. There's nothing else like it. And I've been around for a long time, and I can't draw a corollary because you have Justice, Treasury, DEA, USDA, FTC, SEC. I mean, this is the alphabet soup, right, of everything, and they're all got to try to figure this out. Then you have the tax implications associated with it, and then that roll back into the state programs and the excise. Everybody's going to want their piece. That's going to cause the natural byproduct that we've seen in other states when they've gone from medical to adult or mixed use, and the market fluctuation and the activities. Those things are somewhat predictable. Hopefully they're going to be smart about it and how they do it. So it's going to take some time. But what it will
let me pause you right there, though, Kevin. So just one question, because I'm just super curious. Sure. Do you think that any of that groundwork has taken place at all right now? Like,
oh, no, it is. It absolutely
is. Okay.
It is.
That's encouraging. That's good. Okay.
It is. However, there's always a caveat. And, who was it? Yogi Berra, I can predict the future. Predicting the future is really hard, especially if you're talking about the future. I think the challenge really becomes in, the conversational versus the practical, and writing the rules and regulations, et cetera. And that's what takes time. Right. And again, that interagency piece.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead. Keep going with your other thought, unless you forgot it.
No, I didn't. And so what is going to happen is that, there's going to be this somewhat of a little boomerang associated with this, in that, one, there's a lot of folks that are on the sideline that are going to be like, okay, this is coming. This is really, really happening. And they're going to want to rush in. And then I think also what's going to happen is there's a lot of manual programs that are out there today that are going to be in peril. Because, we're at the low bar for BSA and the rules and regulations. I mean, Washington is not going to make this easier. And so as they add more rules and regulations to this, manual programs that are out there are going to be very, very difficult, if not impossible, to actually continue to grow and scale because of the variability associated with it.
And what do you mean by manual programs?
There are folks that are, they've set up direct relationships, and they have depository accounts and relationships with different cannabis businesses, and they're reviewing the activity of those accounts to their policies and procedures on a monthly basis, et cetera. And, source of funds, source of product, and up against the rules and regulations, especially in mixed adult versus medical, type of product being bought, when it was bought, who bought it, how was it paid for, et cetera. Examiners are looking for a lot more detail. Examiners are being educated in this industry at the same time as everybody else. And so they're looking for more detail and solid proof. And sorry, Bill Gates, but spreadsheets are not technology. I don't care what anybody says. You can't just give a spreadsheet to somebody and go, well, here's my cannabis banking program.
Right. You got to have all probably the compliance, the technology, the software in place to adhere to those requirements and effectively disseminate that information to those regulated bodies, right?
On an evolving basis, because they're constantly changing. Wow. And I think what's also going to happen, and I'm really hopeful that this happens too, kind of coincide with some of these other subsets of some of the acts and the conversations that are going on, is interstate commerce is going to happen. And if you think things are confusing today, start putting interstate commerce into the mix of things. And then shortly behind that, and I really believe this to be true, is you're going to see international commerce come into play. So, the supply chain of the product, or the supply chain of the commerce of the product on top of the product, is really what needs to be measured and monitored up and down all day long. And you look at the complexity and all the different unique rule sets, sides that have to be applied, it is highly, highly complex, but it's also very doable.
Have you ever, okay, so getting back to your background and working in technology, your nerd background, as you put it, have you ever worked in an industry like cannabis where it's this highly complex, but also doable in the sense that we just need to put all these different pieces of the puzzle in place together?
I have. I mean, so there's a few key points to this. So, when I talk about the supply chain of commerce, on top of the supply chain of the plant, a lot of the companies I've run and global client bases, we're in and around supply chain, and not being novel conversation today because of all the other problems we're having. But I mean, I'm a technology nerd, but I'm a real supply chain geek. So I love taking somebody to the grocery store and have them stand in front of a box of cereal and say, "Tell me how that got here." And I break it all the way down to the kernel of corn, and you watch their heads explode. Well, it's very similar here, right? Because you have all these rule sets and you have all these things that are happening, but what matters to this person? What matters to this rule and regulation? What matters to this outcome? And so how do you ingest all that data, and how do you analyze it and present it to the use cases and make it valuable for everybody? But then it's got to scale in such a dramatic fashion. And most importantly, you have to do it at the right price point. You have to constantly drive price point pressure down. And the cannabis industry should not be held hostage for financial services, which is why, from an ethos in the very beginning, somewhat in the spirit of giving back, we never charged cannabis business to be on our platform for access to any of the stuff we do. And we never will. As long as I'm running this company, we're not going to charge them. Their job's hard enough. And You also can't just shift that, right? And say, okay, well, let's just make it up over here on the FI side. We've lowered our prices twice since we've gone to market, and we roll it back to our FI clients right away. We don't wait for them to call. We don't wait for them to ask. We update the prices and we say, here, start charging your clients less. Because it has to work. And if all the pieces aren't there, supply chain thinking, synchronized data, synchronized outcomes and purposes, if none of that exists, you're just going to have this fractured, very small answer. You're not going to build a program, and you're not going to build a framework for a national solution. And that has always been the intent.
I like that holistic approach that you take. And that is so important, I feel like, especially because of the fact that the industry is it's right at the beginning, right? We're at the forefront, and we're talking about safe bank. We're talking about all these kind of policies that need to be put in place to help the industry thrive. But without having that holistic view, like you said, to your point, things will be fragmented, and ultimately it won't work. and that's what we want. We want it to work.
It has to work. This is one of those things that it has to work. This industry is growing so fast and so large. And you look at how many states, and you look at the dollars, and you look at the international componentry. We can't afford for this not to work. And I'm not saying we as in green check. I'm saying we as a country. We cannot afford to not have this work properly. You can't just leave this money and create all this risk for everybody that's involved. And you're further hampering the growth of the industry because of all these businesses that struggle for access to financial and business services that they otherwise can't have. We're holding it back. We put reins on the cannabis industry because of the way people have thought about it and the way they've approached it. And that too is wrong.
Right. You know what? And another point that you raised that makes me think about is like the difficulty of entry into this industry, right? And there's a lot of talk about social equity and putting those who have been disenfranchised by the plant front and center to ensure that they have, their fair shot at the industry. But, when you look at bills like the CAOA with, an excise tax rate of up to 20% or 10%, 15%, whatever it is, it's insane because you're adding that to the state excise tax, right? But then when you talk about like banking also, like we got to make sure that all aspects of this rollout for legal cannabis works properly, to your point earlier, so that those people who have been disenfranchised have even any chance of surviving, right? I mean, there's so many different aspects, and it just makes me think like we got to ensure that we do this right, especially if social equity is top of mind.
Absolutely. And there's some states have tried, some have done better than others. I'm going to reserve comments on which one, so please don't ask. But
California,
some are doing better than others. Some are just flat out gotten it wrong.
Right. That's what I was referring to. Yeah.
I nodded. But this is also part of it. And again, it's not infomercial. This is why, we early on said we have to make this free to the cannabis industry, and we have to make it easy for them. Okay. And I don't, the process of opening a commercial bank account for a high-risk industry is a new and foreign topic for 98% of the folks that enter this space, okay? Even a commercial banking. And they're like, why do I need this? Where do I find this? Why is this important? Why am I telling you this? How do I do this? What about this? What about this? You have to simplify that. And part of the reason why I really, really believe that is, opening a cannabis business, man, you gotta be a brave soul. Okay. Just across the line, because It's a brutal industry. Everybody looks at the beauty of it, right? And, oh, it's growing and people are making money, et cetera. It's worse than opening a restaurant. I mean, you got to be there first thing in the morning. You got to take everything out of the safe, got to put everything out. At the end of the day, you got to repeat the process. You got to keep track of everything, all the rules and regulations. How's this happen? And at the end of the day, you're exhausted, okay? And you'll be like, all right, I'm going to think about banking tomorrow. I can't think about it. And you know what happens? Tomorrow, weeks, months, years. And all of a sudden, they don't have an answer. And now they've gotten so big, it becomes unwieldy. That's just flat out wrong. We don't do that to anybody else. So
not to mention the risk that you're putting those business owners in, right? The dangerous situation of handling cash, in their brick and mortar store. Well, nationwide, we know that the legal cannabis industry can't bank, right? I mean, So it's almost like there's this target on their back, and it's putting these business owners in a very, very dangerous position to be in.
Yeah. Well, and that's why you have to take a very holistic approach about how you do everything for them, including cash management, alternative forms of payment, legal alternative forms of payment, not credit cards and some of these fly-by-night things that are out there. There are some e-payments, but how do you run your business so at the end of the day, okay, and everything's happened, you've had sales, and essentially you can create an electronic deposit ticket, determine your method of transportation of your cash, and within 10 minutes of closing the store, be able to create a bank deposit ticket and maintain a visibility to where your money, cash included, actually is going, because that's another problem. And so, again, it's that holistic supply chain view that we brought from beginning all the way through to the end.
Right. Well, that's a good segue, Kevin, because you've touched on, various aspects of Green Check's value proposition when it comes to financial institutions, right? But I want to give you the floor. I mean, tell us specifically about how Green Check helps these institutions prepare for this boom that's going to have to happen in this multi-billion-dollar industry.
Well, again, we talked about this earlier, Kev. I mean, some of the attitudes have shifted, which is very helpful. But for financial institutions to enter this space, you really have to give them a context. And we had this wrong in the beginning. So we had the right phraseology, but we had the sequencing backed up. And so you really have to be able to talk to the folks within the financial institution, and there's kind of like a triangle of influence that you have to work on. We have to be able to convince the compliance team, that they can do this, and this isn't going to become some new project put upon them from on high, where it's going to mean endless hours and they won't know what to do. You have to convince compliance, but from an influencer perspective, you really have to get the board and the C-suite on board that they're going to do this. And the only way you're going to do that is you got to give them a reason why. Why would you bank cannabis? Not, can you bank cannabis? We're moving past that to the earlier point. And you have to give them a context. And they have no frame of reference as to what the market opportunity, what the market size would look like. And so we work very, very closely with them to identify what that financial opportunity for their very specific financial institution looks like. And again, for us, it doesn't matter about the size of the FI or candidly the type of the FI. What does cannabis banking look like for you? And create a 5-year model for them and to show them that this is a growing business. It's right outside your door. You have zero cost of customer acquisition. You have no CapEx to start the program. And once you understand what that opportunities looks like, and you understand from a risk assessment for your bank and all the policies and the procedures, et cetera, that you could do this and you can articulate your plan with your examiner, now you have a common framework of conversation and to vote on it. And if you vote on it, then the simple part candidly becomes, how would you do that? And that's where we come in, obviously with the software. But what we also do, which is different, is we're all performance-based pricing. So if your program grows, your fee structure with us will grow in a commensurate level. But if you don't, we become shelfware. And that's the kiss of death for a software company. But we believe in what we're doing and how we're approaching it to enable that. And so it really, those first 3 tenets of why would you do it, can you do it, and how would you do it? That's how we convince the FIs. But what's gone on from there is you can't rest on your laurels. And so because we started with this foundation of transaction monitoring, which is the key, okay, especially when you start looking at interstate and international commerce, then how do you expand from an FI your products and services? So what started with just depository banking relationship has now moved into full scale, full suite of financial and business services for these cannabis businesses offered by FIs. And so we enable the FIs to lend to the cannabis industry, foreign concept previously, more and more are doing it. We have FIs that are coming to us to start with a lending program and realize they can also take over the beneficial ownership of the depository accounts. So that's a double win for them, not realizing that. Who's bringing insurance? Because all the financial institutions are looking at niche banking, neo-banking, new products and services, their competitive landscape. And again, right outside their door is this multi-billion-dollar industry looking for help. They're raising 2 hands, saying, over here, over here. And so now, when we started, I used to joke, the compliance officer was holding the door closed at the bank saying, we're closed, go away. And they're like, no, it's Wednesday at 2:00. You're open. Now they're like, come on in. How can we help you? What can we do? And that's very refreshing.
Yeah, it sounds like basically Green Check kind of serves as a consultant in a way for these FIs to say, like, giving them the data, like how you first kind of, explain that process of the why would you bank with cannabis, can you, and how would you do it? Is that right? Did I get that right?
Correct. Why, can, how?
Why, can, how, right? And then from there, I mean, that's got to be an important process because of just probably the the concern about the risk, or perhaps even just the uneducation around what's happening within this industry. Like you mentioned, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry where people are just begging for help. So I would imagine that process, first and foremost, is very beneficial to the FIs because they're seeing data, they're seeing statistics, and they're hearing about this firsthand. And their eyes, I would imagine, are probably popping out of their heads like, wait, why are we missing this opportunity?
The coolest part about this, and you really hit the nail on the head. It sounds like you've been in one of the, and more than a few of our calls. So when their internal team presents this to the board, okay, and we do a financial model, we do a full presentation, and they start looking at this 5-year projection. Again, it's very impactful. Community banks, right? So all of a sudden they're looking at this new line of business. Again, no CapEx, zero cost customer acquisition, 90% EBITDA, multi-line revenue, client concentration, everything's right there. They start looking at their eyes. They lose sight of the word cannabis that's built into the presentation. They're like, this is cool. Let me ask more questions. And they drill in. And I think that for us, me personally, one of the super exciting and really cool things, and you can feel it sometimes, and it's happened more than once. They're like, okay, we're going to vote on it. We're still in the call. We're in the room. We're in the room with them, and I'm like, okay, this is binary, right? This is either going to be a big yes or a no. But when did I've never had that experience in my 4 decades of when somebody's going to vote to take on a high risk program or a vendor while you're actually in the room.
Yeah, I've never heard of that before. And I would imagine that's when you go on mute, Kevin. You just kind of sit back and you let them deliberate, right? I mean, not much more to say.
As the phrase goes, stop selling when you sold it.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, so tell me like some of the unique challenges that you've helped, some of these FIs solve once they've kind of entered into the space.
I think, so we have the Canna Curious. Those are the folks that had a small program or wanted to get in, and they started to grow their program. We also, and that's about 50% of our pipeline, our sales pipeline today. 25% of our sales pipeline today are people that started manual programs, and they either realize it's getting out of hand, it's getting out of control because they didn't start with the end in mind, and they didn't realize that's compounded annual growth, and each market's very different. They open an account, 2 accounts, okay, we'll do 5 or 10. And all of a sudden now they're doing, 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million in deposits. And they're like, whoa. We don't even know where to start. Who do we stop? How do we do it? And so about 25% of our pipeline are manual programs that realize automation. The examiner said we need more information, and/or there's a better way so that they can keep their costs down because they're having competitive pressure that's entering the market too. Okay. Right. It's more FIs doing this, which is really cool. And then about 25% of our existing pipeline are switchers, people that are on competitive products. And, they're like, hey, we heard about you. Can you do this, this, this? And we're like, well, we'll show you what we do and you decide. So we're actually moving FIs from competitive platforms over to our solution, which that's really kind of a big check mark that you've arrived. And we were patient, in how we did it. I mean, we took a very intentional and direct focused approach to how do you work within the banking system, not around it, and how do you take technology and enable it in the ways that people want. But started with that foundation because we also put out new product every month. And we have major releases coming out every quarter. We share our product plans, our product direction. So when FIs sign up, it's, and you start a sales cycle, I always live by, from a technology perspective, service to where you are. Okay. We have exceptional client references. Sell to where you're going to be. Okay. You have a sales cycle. What are they going to expect? And then market to where you're going. Let them know that you're going to be their partner in this program, that we're not stopping. We've been hiring like crazy, and most of our hires are on engineering because we have very large plans and visions for where this platform is going to go for the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
Depository services, that's just the beginning. We brought out account monitoring, we have portfolio management, and we have the whole marketplace that we're bringing out in 2022.
Well, that is the perfect segue, because that's what I was going to ask you is, we're in the last month, or coming upon the last month in 2021. What is Green Check's plans, objectives for 2022 and beyond? Like, where do you guys want to be eventually?
Well, we have 2 quarters full of product plans based upon our current team and the new hires. We're hiring, folks. Check out Green Check on LinkedIn.
We can put some of the job recs in the description box on YouTube if you'd like.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we're the big part is, we will have the full direct and indirect marketplaces fully encapsulated now into the platform. It's been somewhat separate. It's going to be fully consolidated so the FIs can manage their entire cannabis banking program much more efficiently. They do it today, but we've created the parent-child relationships, multi-state accounts, multi-state operators, multi-unit operators, different license types. So that whole supply chain of commerce built into the solution. And then for 2022, the whole marketplace. So again, to keep going back to business and financial services, how do FIs offer more products to those CRBs? But more importantly, how do they identify and how do the CRBs opt into which ones they want? Okay. Banks have a hard time selling things, especially in this high risk industry. So back to the data, how do you enable that data intelligently and allow people to raise their hand and use that data that's available because of the compliance that we have, because we're looking at that baseline transaction level detail all the time. And we're identifying the level of compliance for all these industries, and we're looking at their growth and their scale. And so that identifies for a financial opportunity, financial institution, hey, this cannabis business is growing. They've run a real compliant business. Maybe they want a loan. Okay. How do they look at their portfolio of accounts and say, I want to talk to that business? We're going to make that easier for them because we're using the data and we're allowing the CRB to raise the hand.
Yeah, it sounds like a matchmaking type initiative. I mean, I don't want to, lessen what y'all are doing, but it sounds like, using that data to inform the FI, hey, this cannabis business has been, compliant. Here's all their records. Here's all their information, do more research here. But you're kind of taking out that grunt work, and that research part of what they would have to do anyway. Right.
And we're making it bi-directional, right? So the CRB can actually, say, you know what, I'm interested in an insurance quote. My insurance is coming up at a point in time. Who would that go to? It's going to go to the FI, but if the FI opts out and they don't want to have that, or that's not part of their portfolio of services, that should not be a dead end for the CRB.
Right.
Who are the other players that are going to be in the marketplace that will raise their hand and will want to serve them? And because all these businesses are now banked, okay, and have true banking accounts, banking services, ACH, et cetera, you're seeing more people in the marketplace want to work with the CRBs. One, they're compliant. Two, they know how they're going to get paid. And plus, they have that direct connection and opportunity to scale. So it really creates this cyclone effect. People like to talk about the network effect. More FIs, more CRBs. More CRBs mean more CRBs mean more people, but it's really cyclonic in that an FI will have 25 to 50 CRBs, and that creates that many more relationships, and it just keeps expanding. And, as of today's call now, we're at 72 different FIs in 35 states, and we have probably 1,800 CRBs on the platform, all in various stages of growth and banking and depository services and lending. And so each and every day, literally, the numbers go up because there's more CRBs, there's more sales, there's more deposit, there's more opportunity, and people are seeing that and gravitating to wanting to be able to work together because everything's available to them in one cohesive location.
Right. No, that cyclone model that you described makes a lot of sense. It's fascinating, Kevin, to be honest, and it sounds like y'all are adding tons of value within the industry. And I really appreciate you sharing, not only your background, but of course all the great work that Green Check is doing. And I want to leave the floor to you before we wrap up. Is there anything that's top of mind that you want to leave the audience with?
Well, if you're a CRB and you're struggling, contact us. We always try to help. And again, this is free, and we do our best to partner you with FIs. We hold webinars every month, for CRBs and financial institutions that are exceptionally well attended. The answers are out there, but it's the end of the day. How am I going to do this? If you're a CRB, and if you're an FI, you just keep hearing, or you try to bring up the conversation internally, cannabis, stop, no. But let's talk about what it might mean. And we're seeing that shift of changes. So I'm just very, very hopeful of, how the trajectory of the industry is going, and the fact that people are opening their minds, they're opening their eyes to, that this does work, and it really can work.
Yeah, we're seeing that more and more people are becoming receptive, and that's a good thing. And Kevin, I mean, your background, very impressive. I mean, cannabis business founder, technology software guru, and soon to be Santa Claus in the next 25 days. You're going to be busy this holiday season, man, but I appreciate you, making time for me in the audience. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise, Kevin. Thank you so very much. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more?
www, obviously, greencheckverified.com. And you can check us out on LinkedIn and Twitter. LinkedIn is the quickest and fastest way to look up Green Check Verified. We put out a ton of content, more content than anybody else on banking, cannabis, financial services, and what that actually looks like. And again, we do podcasts 2 to 3 a month, and we're at tons and tons of events. This is about education. Education has been front and center all along, and we just pump it out there. We never charge anybody for any of that either. This is about getting the word out, making people aware.
I love that. Yeah, no, I'm totally about the education aspect. And Kevin's not lying. I did check out the website, and y'all do have tons of resources, videos. You have a whole dedicated blog site. It's just great that y'all are focusing on that education aspect, because hey, that's what's going to really help propel everyone forward. People that aren't aware of this industry, and maybe are hesitant to even consider learning because of the stigma. We're going to be breaking those barriers with education, and we appreciate Green Check and you guys doing that, Kevin. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And thank you all for listening.
All right. Bye. You well all.